In the quiet corners of Montana Falls, John Marshall found peace. A decorated Marine veteran, he sought solace in the solitude of his 15-acre forest, where memories of his father and the simplicity of life guided him. But when a local HOA president tried to impose control over his land, everything changed. What followed was a battle not just for land, but for his right to live free. This is the story of how one man's quiet resistance took on an entire community and won. Welcome to the Quiet Stand. John Marshall had always known solitude. It wasn't something that scared him. In fact, it was what he craved after his time in the Marines, where the noise of battle had once been deafening. There was something peaceful about the silence of the Montana Falls wilderness. His 15-acre plot of land, tucked away in the heart of the forest, was his sanctuary. It wasn't just land to him. It was where he had built his life, his memories, and his father's legacy. Hunting was never just a hobby. It was survival, a way to connect with his past and to preserve his identity. But that peace was about to be shattered. It started as a simple visit. One cold morning, John was out in the woods when a knock echoed at his door. He opened it to find a man in a crisp uniform, holding an official letter with the HOA's logo stamped across it. The man handed him a citation for violating HOA rules. John's eyes narrowed as the words on the paper made little sense. Hunting on his own land. He had been doing it for years, following the practices passed down to him from his father. But according to Betsy Klene, the new HOA president, his property now fell under their jurisdiction. The letter imposed a fine, $7,500, claiming his hunting activities violated new zoning laws. At first, John thought it was a mistake. He hadn't agreed to any of the HOA's rules when he bought the property. But soon enough, more fines arrived to demand to remove his father's old hunting tower, a ban on his fire pit, and complaints about his dogs barking. Each fine came with a tone of mockery, as though Betsy believed she had the right to dictate how he lived on his own land. He tried to reach out to her, but she dismissed him, telling him he was stuck in the past and didn't fit into the community's idea of progress. John had been through worse in his life. He had seen true conflict, faced danger, and survived things most people could never understand. But this bureaucratic attack on his livelihood pushed him to his breaking point. He was no longer just a man trying to live in peace. He was a man fighting for his identity and his right to exist freely on the land his family had known for generations. The escalation was inevitable. Days turned into weeks, and John's patience wore thin. The HOA continued to press him with fines and demands. Then came the final blow. An excavator arrived to demolish his father's hunting tower, the structure that had been built with love and care, the one that held countless memories of his father's lessons. Betsy stood nearby, recording the destruction with a smug smile. John could feel his chest tighten as the last piece of his father's legacy was torn down. He didn't shout. He didn't lose control. He stood there, silent, his eyes fixed on the ruins of his father's tower. He called the sheriff, expecting justice. But the response was anything but what he expected. The sheriff explained that he couldn't do anything because the HOA had filed the proper paperwork. The system was rigged against him. John was on his own. But John wasn't a man who backed down. He had been underestimated before, and this time would be no different. He spent the following days poring over county land records and zoning maps. His mind worked methodically, calculating his next move. After a few sleepless nights, it became clear he needed more than just to fight back. He needed to make a statement. He needed to take back control, not just of his land, but of the power the HOA had assumed over him. John used every cent of his savings, his military pension, the equity from his home, and even his truck to purchase a plot of 42 acres of land that bordered the HOA's territory. It wasn't a small investment. It was a bold gamble that could either secure his land or destroy everything he had left. But to him, it was the only option. The land was not just land anymore. It was his stand against an oppressive system. When the letters went out to the community, it was like a thunderclap. John had made the land his own legally. The HOA now had no claim to it. The residents who had long enjoyed hiking trails and nature walks through the forest suddenly found themselves cut off. The recreational areas they had taken for granted were now private property. Betsy was furious, but there was nothing she could do. The legal groundwork John had laid was flawless. The real turning point came at the next HOA community meeting. John walked in, dressed in his Marine Corps uniform, his posture rigid and determined. The room fell silent as he stood before the board. Betsy was there, fuming, ready to defend her position, but she wasn't ready for what John would say next. "This land is mine now," John said, his voice steady and cold. "There's no HOA here, only freedom." His words were simple, but they hit like a sledgehammer. The board members, including Betsy, were stunned. They had underestimated John, assuming that he would be an easy target, another quiet man they could push around. But now, they were facing something they couldn't control. John had taken back what was his, and he wasn't going to allow them to strip him of it any longer. As the weeks passed, the community began to turn. Betsy's leadership was questioned by the very people she had once claimed to represent, the residents, many of whom had supported her, now realized they had been complicit in the overreach of the HOA. A petition began to circulate to have her removed from office. The tide was turning, and Betsy could feel it. Then came the final blow. The pressure became too much for her to handle. Unable to stand the scrutiny, Betsy sold her house and left the community, disappearing as quietly as she had arrived. The board members who had once followed her without question were left scrambling to pick up the pieces. They reached out to John, offering an apology and acknowledging the mistakes they had made. They even proposed a settlement, hoping to find some way to repair the damage. But John, true to his nature, didn't seek revenge. He didn't want to destroy them. He wanted peace. He wanted to live the quiet life he had fought so hard to protect. The resolution came in the form of a new law, the Marshall Land Rights Act. This law officially recognized John's land as his own, free from the jurisdiction of the HOA. The land he had fought for was now protected by law, ensuring that no one could ever again impose such unjust control over him. John didn't need accolades. He didn't seek fame. He didn't even want recognition for his victory. All he wanted was to live his life in peace, on his land, with the quiet company of nature. But his story spread far beyond the small town of Montana Falls. It became a symbol of quiet resistance, of standing firm in the face of injustice, and of the power of legal knowledge and persistence. In the end, John Marshall didn't just reclaim his land. He reclaimed his freedom. And for the community that had once been divided, his actions sparked a new understanding of what it meant to respect the rights of others and to stand up against those who would seek to control them. The wind through the trees now whispered a different message: freedom.